you're live.
Very cool. How's audio look, Harrison?
I'm getting...
Everyone just kind of talk, rabble for a moment.
Yeah.
Let's see where we're topping out.
I'm afraid I can't do that.
The bars are moving. That central mic seems...
We like it when the bars move.
Topping out in the yellow there, as it should.
Yeah.
Then I think we're all clear to start.
Well, shall I begin then?
I don't know any
I'll make my usual disclaimer. Apparently I'm going to snort all the way through this. I do have one of the valves of my heart is a pig valve, so I think that's why I snort like that now. But so this is the thesis defense of Matt Gordon in the creative writing, the MFA at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. But we say thesis defense, but it is neither of those things. He is neither, although in a way you do have a thesis.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you do have an argument.
It's a pretty radical decision.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll say the thesis part is correct, although it's an implicit thesis, I think, rather than an explicit thesis. But defense is simply the wrong word for what we do now, and it was never the right word, right? Like although my son always wants me to wear, he wants to make me a T-shirt that says thesis offense, so that it's clear which team I'm on when I come to a defense. But this is not really a defense. We will question you. We will talk to you about your expertise. But first of all, as your thesis advisor, I have okayed this defense, and that means that I support your getting the degree. And so this is a capstone experience, but it is not a high stakes capstone experience. We will see what you have to show us. We will discuss it, and then we will have a private conversation. Presumably, we'll tell Harrison not to stream it out. Our conversation about you're getting the degree, but I think you can have pretty good confidence. And I'm very excited. This is, I really like our thesis sessions now. We need to think of a different term, I think, than defense. I mean, I suppose it's formally, but it's just such a
capstone.
What's that? Yeah, capstone. How about that? Yeah, we'll just call it like
a thesis, a capstone.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. So it's a capstone rather than a defense. And I know you've got a lot of extraordinary stuff because you've been sort of out of the mainstream of MFA life for 3 years now, and you were out of the mainstream of that life as an undergraduate here as well. And so mostly I'm just looking forward to being entertained. So entertain us, Matt Gordon.
I can. And honestly, if I could start, I would like to. I brought props, as you can see.
It's not a sledgehammer and a watermelon.
There was a passage that really radicalized me in my MFA, and this is Josie Bernard's multimodal writer that I would love to take a second and read, because this was like, as I started, like I never did traditional work. As Pinckney said, the whole pretense for me being here was not very traditional. And we went through different terms of calling the lab and everything I've been doing different names and different ideas. But this passage like opened up so many questions and like etymological, oh my God, I can't. Etymological, Jesus, thank you. Questions and others that, kind of were the pretense for me doing the things I did. So, multimodality requires writers to shift between types of writing. From a writer's perspective, this is perhaps its key and most challenging characteristic. Even within a single website, it may be necessary for the person creating it to write in a number of different genres and use a range of technologies, perhaps embedding a vlog or a podcast alongside a blog, for example. Further, an author is creating such a website, complete with vlog, podcast, and blog, as a part of the job of building an author platform to promote his or her work. Then the material on the website is just one section of the bigger picture of the job of being a writer. That is, while creating the website, he or she may also be writing a proposal for a screenplay and are working to get grips with an unexpected and unwanted software upgrade. As well as posting every few hours on social media, he or she may be completing a full-length novel. In summary, then, a key problem for writers in the digital age is the need to move, often at speed, between different genres and technologies. And you know, we talk about the digital humanities and other problems, and the fact that I hate that term because there's no floor or ceiling to its definition. But that raises, you know, that passage from Josie Bernard is so effective to communicate like the importance of how I feel like I've set myself up as the graduate director of the Digital Xpressions Lab to enable writers to make these complicated works, right? We were just talking about AI, right? And how fast emerging AI tools move. Well, when you mix that with all the different, you know, media and mechanisms of creating story and all the various skills that go into that, it's like nearly impossible to ask one singular, like immaculate creative author to be a master of all of them, to perform at such a level to create meaningful works. And especially at larger scales, right, it's a collaborative effort. This goes back to, right, like the film industry. This isn't a truly radical idea, but in a writing program, as we're kind of bridging the gap into newer medium, and I say newer medium, but I'm talking about like from film to video games, so how new is it really? And audio fiction, it's really an impossible demand for one artist to come in and create the whole thing. So I've set up my lab and my thesis statement kind of branching off of Josie Bernard's point about being a multimodal writer. So I've wanted to create a facility that can enable both myself and others to actually do that, right? And in a meaningful way during our 3-year MFA, or even across a year, which is the span in which my portfolio today covers, produce meaningful works that are multimodal in nature, from jumping from audio to games to other, but also within a single work, right? That work itself is multimodal.
Well, and that's also, right, I mean, to go all academic on you for a minute,
Yeah.
but I mean, you know, it is a new idea as presented there, but it is also the idea of Gesamtkunstwerk, right?
Yes.
So,
Well,
I
no,
mean, I
I'm
don't know if you
disagreeing.
want-
No.
right, but it is that idea of, you know, that Wagnerian idea of the opera as taking in every one of the senses, as using every bit, you know, as using science, using art, you know, using audio, using visual, yeah, and the artist as the auteur of that entire universe, right? And we're kind of re-encountering that now after having maybe lost that a little bit for a while.
And the losing of it was such a myth, and I think back to Raph, like your classes of the white male mid-50s, you know, the great American novelist, right?
That was my training. Like that
And
was
how
what I
much
was
of a myth
supposed
that was.
to do. Oh, believe me,
Well,
some of us fell off that cliff.
Yeah, right.
It was
Well,
really
the
alarming.
myth of the kind of the sequestered genius,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You know, and this is I love this kind of Wagnerian contrapoint because that was the German romantic image,
Right.
You know, like I'm just going to retreat into my little world and produce a, you know, work of genius. And so you've demonstrated in your work since I met you that kind of that isolation and that separation of self, separation of, you know, mode, genre, you know, from all others is such a fiction. It shouldn't happen. It is impossible.
No, it's impossible, and it's also boring.
Yes,
right?
as
And you're
hell.
so limiting, and like, it's what I've been saying since before. Well, when I was deciding to become a creative writing undergrad, the argument I made to myself and to others was like, yeah, I could spend years locked in my bedroom banging away at a laptop and maybe that'll be something, but I get to come and interact with other people, get new ideas, and experience things more fully and challenge and push things. And it's nice to have watched a MFA in creative writing program grow to, I don't know how much I've been pushing or pulling at various stages to make it, accessible to different folks, but to watch it turn into something that's more meaningful.
I will simply say,
Yeah.
absolutely, we would not be where we are now if you had not joined the program.
Thank you.
No, there's no question that you have been a huge motive force for the changes we have made. Whether that's good or ill will depend on how the singularity goes for us.
Yeah.
If we survive it, then you are our Moses.
It's a good place to be.
You're my Moses. And I also feel like and by that I mean I feel like I've learned so much from you. You know
That's
what I mean?
very kind.
I've learned so much from you, and I've always felt, I feel like that's this with all my grads, but I always feel like we are each coming to the table with our own areas of expertise. I felt like I've been exchanging knowledge with you for the past 3 years. You're sharing stuff with me, I'm sharing stuff with you. We're going back and forth, and it's been this incredible dialectic. It's just been this beautiful experience.
Well, and just like I think, just like the myth of the the individual isolato, right, in a garret,
Right.
the idea of an MFA as from us to you is also mythological, right? The idea of the wise writers, like I'm completely different as an artist, as a technologist, whatever it is that I am, which no longer has a name, because of the people we have in the program, you all, right? Because I would, they're the folks who convinced me that, I had all these weird ideas, but until you see, is anybody else buying this? And then you see people do it, and they're making better art than I am or will with these technologies. And, and so, no, it's not. It's the top-down thing is a myth, too. I'm finding out literally everything I was trained to do was a myth. No, it was kind of a good myth. You know what I mean? For me, it was a really good myth, and it sustained me for a long time. But it's unsustainable now. So anyway, that was my speech. Sorry, I didn't. I'm pretending it's my thesis defense.
And it feels weird, and it feels weird to even submit a portfolio to you all in the beginning of April, a month out before the end of my MFA, because it's just a collection of media to prove this argument, right? And there's still so much happening and so much incipient evidence that's not going to be a part of my thesis. It seems almost foolish to me with the graduate school's deadline. So no, I really appreciate you all and the chance to work with all three of you over the last couple years, and people that see my perspective as something valid and bolster that.
To take Pinckney and Wagner's term, right? Your thesis is a Gesamtes Werk.
Yes, yes.
And it is ongoing. It's a living document.
Yeah, right.
And it's going to keep on happening after he goes.
And that's the big difference. Is that everybody, not everybody, many people, the vast majority of people who have graduated from this MFA program and every other one in the country immediately stopped when they left because the reality of the world put the lie to that myth of the isolato, right? And now we see, Ismail, he's not giving up. He's not going to stop. It's going to expand outward and outward and outward, right? Now we've got people who are moving into the world who, anyway, it's so my arms are horripilating. My hair stands up because it's so exciting. Right? It's like, my God, my life isn't a lie. I'm not just sending people, we have bye, and pushing them on the back and they fall into, Mount Doom. I want to work with them. When we said earlier today, Ismail, you have to keep in touch. There have been theses where I'm like, oh yeah, please keep us advised of your
I've streamed
progress. Yeah, and I'm like, oh my God, please never contact me again. But in these cases, I want what we have built here, the labs we built, the talent we've built to continue as support for the people we're creating. Anyway, I'm sorry, I apologize,
No,
but
that's fine.
it is like, this is, as retirement and death creep ever closer, and become realities for me. It's really exciting not to have to lie anymore.
Yeah.
Well, I think also to, as someone looking, from the outside in for the last few years with what's been going on, and also with the jealous eye.
No, I mean you.
But I think
built
where you're challenging all of this, you're challenging the structure, you're challenging the history, it's like, look, like, what is the academy, and to not just kind of bring that same baggage, carrying it again and again and again, year after year, and us, with this notion that the defense, the MFA, is somehow the pinnacle. That's the end. So you're done.
Yeah.
You're done.
Yeah,
now you go away. Or that is, if it is a step, then it's a step. I mean, certainly with writing, it's like, to be a particular kind of writer. So to put onto some path. But I think what this program has done, and what you have done through your experiments in helping to build it, is challenge those notions and challenge, just challenge all of us, I think, for the university as well, but also set yourself up for a sustainable future. So that now, just as you and I were chatting more informally last week or whenever it was, just, it's like, oh my gosh, you can do this, you can do this, you can go there, you can go to there. It's like, and then what about this? And then what about that? So that, and I would say that technology is, a key part in that, because, it's like you weren't getting an MFA in pencils and pens. So, and I like this multimodal writer thing. So again, just that expansive notion of, and the continued life. Like, why get an MFA?
Yeah.
It's like, why bother if it's not going to bring something to your continued, evolution, progress, whatever.
Yeah.
This has really been such a nice proving ground, and an argument for the university system of what it can retain and become as this place of money that can support artists experimenting.
Oh yeah.
Right? And that's kind of been the frame of my work.
A new patronage.
Thank you. I know we were just discussing this the other day. No, it's so wonderful, because I've had the opportunity to go from 3 years of thinking, okay, I'm going to write a novel, I'm going to produce an audio, I'm going to produce this one story that's multimodal, to suddenly my last year here being the director on 2 major pieces of software that are presented at both Michigan State and SIUC School of Medicine. Thank you. And being the launching pad, or kind of this incubation center for other folks to pass through this area and get excited and go to conferences and put things together and experiment with AI and make games. And it's really been incredible to be facilitating that work and running a facility that I don't need to worry about money or budget. Just we get space, and I get to see people that I respect, like yourselves and John Pollitt's, give me thumbs up that what I'm doing is important, and just very hands off of green light the projects you think are worth it, right? I've shot way up, and if I ever try to join any sort of development studio not at the top level, I'm gonna have a heart attack, right? Because I've already been doing that, So it's been fun. Would it be prudent for me to read my thesis
Yes, please.
statement?
Let's talk about ourselves for a minute.
And how great we are. What a good job I've done.
But let me tell you what I've done.
So I actually don't know where my thesis statement is in my vast collection of things.
But
So I'm gonna
while
pull
you're
it up.
looking for that, I
Yes.
will just
Please
add.
vamp for me.
No, I will add, because I think that what is most exciting here is how, through the collaborations, through all the various individuals who have come through this thing and are carrying it on in some way or another, the sparks, just those various sparks that I think have brought life to, a number of people, and however small the fire might be at times, and maybe not even noticed by the rest of the campus sometimes, but also just how your antenna has been there, kind of always kind of sniffing, listening, and also beaming out. So I just so again, and I'm partly it's like, oh, but what about me? So but I just was remembering the artist is the antenna of the human race, and I don't remember whose quote it is, but whether it is the artist as the like more of a broadcast, like, look, I'm bouncing this out, or I'm more like the insect antenna always sort of feeling out. I think that that's what's really started happening here, and so the challenge is also to sustain these activities so they don't go away when you're done with this, when you go away, that they can continue, and that they haven't been just an effort to just sort of support or grow one particular seed.
Well, and I've been saying this, it's been like this existential, like, sword of Damocles moment over the past, like, couple months, because it feels like a premature retirement. Things are just firing off. I'm able to greenlight software projects, etc., and then I just need to step away. And it's been like, oh my God. And that actually reminds me, the point you made there, Carla. No offense to the rest of you, but one of my favorite and like most quotable pieces of advice I got from a professor here during my time at SIU was from Allison Joseph, who's not a part of my panel, but it was this like reinforcement that an artist and a writer's job is 50% or equal parts both consumption and creation. And as you were, with your antenna metaphor there, Carla, that immediately reminded me of that. And the position I've held as the graduate director of the Digital Expressions Lab, Digital Humanities Lab, and what will become the Center for Virtual Expressions, the joy has been that my creativity can flow, and I feel like on any given day it's a 90-10 split, because people are coming to me with their ideas, I'm helping manifest their ideas, I'm giving them direction, I'm either contributing as a writer or director or producer or this or that technologist, and it's thrilling in a way the kind of like sequestered author was never thrilling to me, right? And it keeps me busy and active and interested in making things. Which, from what I've heard listening to other, directors at software companies, and for anyone that plays games, Masahiro Sakurai has a series on game production and about the position of a director in a game studio, and a lot of the same rhetoric, being able to see, projects in a way other folks can't, or being kind of that bolstering voice and what that leadership means to a software project. And that really feels like where my home is, and how the MFA can serve me as the seeing the totality of the work, and that writer's sensibility of like where's the gut punch in what we're doing, right? Where's the best conflict of the scene, or even what's the best part of the thing that we're producing, and how do we sell that? How do I communicate that? So my thesis statement, and this, I don't believe this is pulled up on the screen. It might not have been delivered, but that's all right. The thesis statement that I'm technically defending here is the purpose of Matthew Gordon's work as a graduate student, a research assistant, and as the graduate director of the Digital Xpressions Lab, is to provide effective support for the digital expression of collaborators and clients' domains of knowledge, and to form an innovative research partnerships with academics within the SIU system and beyond. To achieve this goal, Matthew will match client research and development needs with the Digital Xpression Lab's available resources, such as assistance in production, community and domain knowledge, direction, and or technology, being hardware or software, to enable said clients to realize products they would not have otherwise been able to produce. So I have a whole bunch of stuff. Up right now is my collaborator statement. So this is I frame this as my kind of quantitative data. Or my original undergraduate was in sociology, so I'm bringing a little bit of that to the table. My qualitative data here, I sent out requests for collaborator statements to folks that I've worked with just over the past year, just while I've held the position as the graduate director of the lab. And these are some really wonderful messages. Yeah, this up on screen right now, that's the prompt as it was sent out. So it was some questions to get them started thinking about their relationship to the lab, what the lab did for them, to get sort of concise statements in some open-ended sections for folks to write. And I've had undergraduates who've produced podcasts, all the way up to, again, John Pollitt's Dean of the Library, who uses our audio equipment to produce the SIUC Stories podcast. People I've worked with on large-scale software development projects, and others, just talking about what the lab has been able to do for them. And I've included these statements unedited, right? I whole cloth copied and pasted, because I wasn't really interested in changing anyone's language. I'm very interested in bolstering the dynamic voices that come into my door and projects that I get to contribute to and help produce. So whole cloth, without masking or code shifting or any regard for academic whatever, right? These are kind of the natural statements that people generated that sent to me. And so, these are just, again, whole cloth included in this document here, the various statements folks sent to me. So I also have plenty of kind of the quantitative evidence, right? The videos, screenshots, other pieces of projects. So if you'd like to discuss any projects in specific,
yes,
yeah.
I am so interested in sepsis.
In sepsis,
I'm
yeah.
so interested as an idea. And
Yeah.
also
No,
as a
that's
project.
been the joke of the lab
I
since
know.
like December.
No,
We love sepsis.
Sepsis. It's an amazing name for
We're
it.
very pro-sepsis.
Yes, sepsis. Specifically, I was just so interested in you using one of my pet interests is kind of like medical narrative and like using narrative therapeutically in medical settings. And I've always been so intrigued by how people do that and how people help translate the sort of like the experience of the human body to doctors, in a qualitative way.
Yeah.
And you were doing that.
Yeah.
And it was very cool, and I want to know more about how you did that.
Well, I can say it's payoff to conversations that Pinckney and I have been having with various folks for at minimum 4 years. So bridging into my MFA, we talked to healthcare management and the medical school about collaboration and VR and simulation and the importance of simulation in training in the healthcare industry and all the virtues that come from that, from writing and being able to communicate and pierce someone with sort of your emotional thesis in a piece of fiction, right? Mixed with the engagement of game design and gameplay loop and kind of that doing that makes experiences both narrative and mechanical really sticky in the brain, right? And VR's ability to kind of like jump through your perception and just experience this stuff in a really immersive way. And so the conversations was always like, yeah, that would be a great idea. Like, of course that would work, and the literature was out there. But we were just searching for clients. And I had the opportunity to produce a an honors course with healthcare management on campus here called VR and Healthcare, and it was a mixture of teaching VR literacy and creative writing as it applies to healthcare narratives and training healthcare folk and actually MRI technicians. And that bridged into working for the SIU Foundation and developing a demo, a VR demo that would simulate, right, the experience of being in an MRI machine to sort of desensitize the patient. So I went from healthcare engineers, right, to the patient side of things and realizing, right, what simulation can do to ease anxiety and bring sort of a humanist approach to healthcare. And so finally we got an interested party that wanted to move forward with this in Dr. Sellenfreund and the medical school. And Dr. Sellenfreund is the head of, not immunology, but do you know his department offhand? It's escaping me at the moment.
I just know him when he's here on campus.
Yeah,
on my screen.
It might be virology, if I remember correctly, or pathology.
Yes, it's
pathology. Thank you. Yes, I got it. We got there. Working with him has been really delightful, and we consulted to him. We talked about using Twine, kind of the text adventure, really low threshold for getting in and making games. And some of his, final year med students who are like in their residency made this Twine. And it kind of plays like if a doctor made it, you know what I mean? It's very imaginative. But their goal, like their point in doing so.
At the end, you get a Porsche.
Yeah, at the end, you get a Porsche. Yeah. It's great. My favorite game. But it was designed to like take over some of the high stakes assessment and exams, right? And instead replace them with simulation, this replicable simulation. And we talked about the different objectives and different learning goals of the software, right? Of that mixed with game design and game theory. And I'll say that came up a lot at the Meaningful Play conference at Michigan State. It was wonderful to participate in conversations with folks that had those sorts of thoughts and considerations between game and narrative and sort of your learning objectives and how to split the difference. And so what we got to largely do was adaptation and enhancement. Right? So I got to be the director of this VR software where we converted their Twine into a VR game. Right? So we had to, get in this data and figure out what the character, the scene was, reinterpret their scoring system in scene and with the meaning behind that, right? And understand what was going on. So it evolved over the past couple months and to complete a development project where I was leading a team of 4 other individuals, a narrative team and a development team, and complete a like alpha version in 4 months has been insane to be able to work and scaling the project to be completed in that time and etc. It's been a wonderful experience. So we needed to consider various things and we brought kind of our writerly chops to it, right? And leading a development team out of my lab that's interested in writing and having those sort of cross conversations where I straddle both domains. And talking to the writers of being like, that's a neat idea, but let's listen to the developers of what the reality of trying to implement that. And they're like, no, I get it, we can't do it. But I'm like, no, really listen, right? They need to do this and this and this and the coding that goes into it and understanding each other. To make interesting things happen, or we would run up against a barrier, right? And the developers would need to shift gears, and I would say, okay, writers, solve this problem, right? Get your hats on, and let's go in front of the whiteboard. And it has to be like this. So how do we explain that narratively so we don't lose our ludonarrative cohesion that's going on, right? And one of the big moments, the best way to summarize it is they have a scoring system in their quiz, in what was a quiz for the Twine game, right? That just kind of, the patient gets sicker and dies. And the patient can get like 200, 300% dead if you answer all the questions wrong. And I'm like, there's some dissonance there, And so I got to explain this concept to med students. And so we had to reinterpret that. What's the verb of the player, especially in VR, and this gets into game design theory, right? What's the verb of what the player is doing? Well, the player isn't like curing or addressing sepsis, right? They're not treating, right? That's not the verb that's going on here. You are a medical student with an attending physician in the room next to you, and the attending physician is quizzing you in front of a patient. So what's the scoring metric? What can go wrong? You know, if the heat goes up in the room, what out of that action is doing it? And I think it was actually a med student who suggested that it's patient stress. That's what you're measuring for. That's the conflict in that story, right? Picture yourself in a hospital bed, you're sick, right? You're currently suffering from sepsis, and some jackass walks in with a teenager or 20-something-year-old, I suppose, and starts talking about you like you're not in the room. And if anyone's been attended in a hospital or any medical setting with a medical student, it's very uncomfortable, right? And so what we were surveying, and this is kind of our empathetic learning objective, was you are upping a patient's stress if you're not remaining calm and answering these questions effectively, right? If you're a prop in the room, that's going to drive you insane. So it's so fun to figure out that ludonarrative harmony and synthesize the learning objectives, the gameplay, and the narrative. And so then moving back into something less multimodal, right? Like prose writing, which is not to knock novels or linear prose writing. It just, for me as a creative, feels like being put in a coffin and buried underground, right?
So not to say anything.
No. And it's totally
just like being buried alive.
You know that thing you've been touring for?
I've been buried alive this whole time. I'm 100% dead.
And I recognize that, and maybe but this new ability and this excitement, and it taps into. I think someone asked me recently of we had a visiting alum who's a screenwriter come by on Monday, which thank you to Carla and Prime for bringing him by. But he asked so how did all this start for you? For me, he was seeing Star Wars, and that's how I knew I wanted to become a screenwriter. And I was well, for me, it was playing games, and it was consuming a lot of kind of this multimedia narrative content that existed as I was growing up, and being excited by that, and move from toys to the TV to the games to this to the comics to that, and getting the whole story and engaging with all these different medium. And so I don't know, maybe my brain was wired in a certain way growing up with that sort of free-flowing nature, where that's what excites me as a creative, of being able to bounce between one to the other. And so games really do that, and being a director of a game really does that in a way that even just being a games writer doesn't do for me. Mm-hmm. Did that kind of answer some stuff about
more
sepsis?
than enough. Yes, it did. And
I feel buried alive.
I love what you're saying about finding that ludonarrative harmony, because I don't think like a game developer, so I can't think of the ludic elements of a novel I've written. So it's incredible that you can. I'm just blown away that you can take a narrative, and be let's gamify it, and gamification. It's such a dirty word nowadays, but it's not when there's a narrative gamification that encourages empathy, encourages understanding, encourages self-exploration and the exploration of the interiorities of others. That's a fantastic gamification. So I'm so excited to see what you create as the inevitable head of development.
Thank you. Well, and that's sort of it, just from an observer, a lit comp side of things, that hasn't escaped my purview as a part of this project. If we could go to a full screen video here or just even a full, let's watch the sepsis video, and then we can just take a look at Neophyte Studio, which is where everyone's watching this, the YouTube page, and I can talk about some of the different series that were developed and the meaning behind it. But if you want to hit play, Harrison, which thank you for all your work here, your diligence. I don't know if it's playing for us, but the stream should be getting some audio, so I'll actually shut up here. And if you're not getting audio, enjoy the silence. that's a pretty good sense of what it is, and it carries on like that. Suffice it to say, and that's an in development kind of shot of what we're doing. So you can see that the basic translation is a translation of what is essentially a multiple choice quiz, right? Mm-hmm. And we're like, how can we embellish and enhance that? Of course, the characters aren't animated there because you make a box and you write all the code for the box, and the box slips and slides like a car does, and then you model the car, and then you put the car on top of it, and then you make the wheels move, and that's how game development works. So it's a lot of static poses and other simplifications there, but mechanically what we're producing is this alpha build, which is the full suite of mechanics working. And that's what we're going to be presenting at the, I think it's the Medical Learning Conference, if that's the correct name for it.
Yeah, in Springfield.
Next week in Springfield, which is April 13th for anyone watching this later. So it was a very fun experience, and even, things that for me were, I want to say obvious but self-evident, which is my favorite term to use in the lab. People come in with self-evident projects or ideas or design decisions that become self-evident. These self-evident ideas of like, okay, what's the interface look like that you interact with VR, right? And I have the sort of games and software literacy for the creative and the consumer side to know, oh, it's going to be this, 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 and this. And there's a couple people in the room I don't need to articulate that to, and there's a couple people in the room that I need to fully explain the idea and all the options so they're understanding. And that's a fun experience to kind of question the biases of what's happening in a game development space when you're working with software people and writers who are included at stage 0, and consultants, right, medical students that are included at stage 0. And that it was fun to recognize my own kind of assumptions that took place, right, my biases and what needed to be done to produce that product, right? And in explaining those points, it only ever made it better, right? Because we thoroughly explored every option that I might have tuned out in my brain. These are creative or technical decisions that I take for granted. And in talking them out, it questioned my bias and allowed other folks outside the domain to raise interesting questions. And like that's how the question of the scoring meter and what we frame that scoring as to come about, right? I don't know if I would have gotten there on my own, or if I did, it would have taken much, much longer, right? But pulling outsiders and having them in conversation all the way from square one of production was really just, I think, the best way to make a piece of software like this. So some other work we did, my initial project when I got here for the MFA was creating a digital content publishing platform, and that's Neophyte Studios with this Twitch and YouTube and other places, game jams on itch.io. But here we're looking at kind of the front page of our YouTube channel. And we've done some analysis, which is a great way to let writers with little or no experience in games into the conversation, right? Just bring your domains as perhaps traditionally trained writers, allowing to comment on a new piece of media with your authority as a narrative expert, right? Just like a film review from someone who's never seen a film but has written 1,000 novels. That's interesting scholarship as far as I'm concerned. So, our best performing video is the BAFTA award-winning game Disco Elysium. So we've got the Writer's Play kind of sub-name to that, and even Neophyte Studios itself, Pinckney, myself, and another MFA collaborated on that title, and it feels very evident of the approach that, like, total neophytes were just banging away at this. Our setup today is all consumer-grade cameras, nothing like bulky or professional. So we're fully neophytes at this. We're writers just trying to make our way into these conversations, and hopefully other folks will see the meaning in that. Or we have successful folks like yourselves saying, oh, there is something virtuous in this exploration, which lets someone like me kind of backdoor my way into legitimacy, which I love. I love not taking kind of the straight path or taking a shortcut. So, you know, all of our top videos, if this isn't evident of the interest here, are on Disco Elysium itself, and the need for writers to have scholarship on it, and writers play videos more broadly. As we kind of scroll down, or actually we could take a look at, this is fine, or take a look at the playlists. We could see kind of the different subcategories of different things. So, you know, graduate classes, we've stringed graduate classes, kind of the democratization of what we do, and that initiative to be interesting and be creative rather than spend 3 years working on 2/3 of a novel or what have you. We've had historians on the channel taking the same writer's play approach, scientists as well. Graduate story time and graduate classes were kind of the same thing there. We've streamed SIU finals, like a theater final and my own game design course that I took. We streamed that out so students have, you know, this video of their work and the presentations that they made. I think there's virtue in just that existing as a digital object. Neophyte Chronicles, how could I forget? And Raph, John Chi Travolta, my favorite thieving hair. We started a D&D actual play tabletop RPG podcast, like Critical Role or Dimension 20, or, you know, Not Another D&D podcast, Dungeons and Daddies. I mean, like, the list, like, is endless, right? With these shows that have been quite successful. Well, you know, we're writers. We should absolutely be participating in this space, and these are conversations we've had since, like, my first grad classes with Pinkney and Raph, talking in those spaces of, like, we should just stream D&D. We should just make this show. We should just make this show. And that's kind of the epitome of why we got this studio, is we outgrew kind of the office space and needed this setup to stream tabletop RPG content. And so one show that was only supposed to be a semester, All Guts No Glory, GM'd and written by Alexis, evolved and became running an entire academic year. And then my own show that I wrote and GM with, you know, all of us managing 6 players, which is more of a feat than I thought it was. So, you know, shout out to the GMs that are able to handle that and handle a show and keep things moving for video content. It's a huge feat. You know, we're well into nearly 20 episodes produced in one academic year, average 2 hours a piece. So someone else, you know, who's not a writer can do the math of how many hours of content that is. And, you know, I'd like to say it's watchable at the very least, which I'm thrilled by.
No, it's very enjoyable.
So, you know, that's an exciting thing of, like, okay, here's like an art object that only existed because we got this space and because I got to bully somebody who liked D&D and push them in a corner and say, now you're making a show, you better have plot and content. And find people that are like, oh, I've always wanted to play D&D, but I never have, and just Shanghai them into this room and get them to sit down and play a game together and have a good time and make content and make interesting decisions. So, you know, that's been a very fun process. And, you know, we have a few other kind of smaller things, but we've published, you know, other student creative work, other video content, discussions, conversations, and lest I forget, our narrative game jams, which was kind of my first foray into conferences and, like, community engagement. Over on itch.io, Neophyte Studios has our own page where we've been running game jams for 3 years. I was going to say 3 semesters, but that's not right. Just engaging, like, an actual global population of game makers that just want to have the opportunity to make something and put it in front of us in our academic program, which is, like, so thrilling. And these are all the submissions just for, I think this was February's game jam, our 5th game jam in 3 years. We got 19 entries, 69 individual ratings. I think we had, like, 80 people interested, which in the realm of itch.io and game jams, you land like between 0 and 10 people, and then the 10 people to 50 is kind of a big threshold to cross, right? And then 50 to 100, and then once you kind of break that barrier, you're a big deal, and you get hundreds to thousands of people engaging in your game jam. So I'd like to say we've kind of grown into that middle tier of a game jam, and had the chance to get all of these artists into our Discord, Neophyte Studios Discord, and talk to them just as normal people, as normal creators, pixel artists, audio engineers, game makers who collaborate back and forth with our MFA students. And like to get that sort of professional experience has been amazing. One of our graduates who we worked on Neophyte Studios with, Dylan Davis, collaborated outright with an artist. I think he was an Australian game maker, and I believe they've maintained, sort of this relationship in the game industry. And so it's professional development. It also kind of gasses up the people that are making games and our people, that there's this global interest in. And so I've very much been interested in creating our own platform and not waiting. And I found Michigan State ran the Meaningful Play Conference in 2022 now, Jesus. I forgot what year it was, so last fall. And that was a great platform and a great way to meet people. But as far as like narrative game and games that are narrative first and what that means and what's interesting, we've needed to make the competitions and the events ourselves, which leads into like we're doing our digital narrative showcase this semester. And thank you to Lindsay Pierce for organizing that and letting me oversee that amongst my other duties. And with the idea that in 2 or 3 years this could be a national or international conference, and we at the lab and SIU and the creative writing program can be setting the conversation about this work. So it all kind of spills into each other, and even from day one, right, my head's been in the same place it's been now. And my portfolio to me is really just a collection of media that says, oh, and I did this here and I did this here. I was a director or producer. I helped make this or make this platform, or I helped enable this conversation. And this whole ethos of being able to do things individuals wouldn't be able to do, right? That like immaculate conception of the individual author is complete bullshit. We need to be banding together and using the university as that kind of new patron, and seeing how far we can push it and legitimize ourselves and make interesting things, and when need be, create the platform ourselves to talk about it. Yep.
This is what you just said was so beautiful and profound, and I'm going to ask a very small question.
Thank you. No, thank you. That means a lot coming from Rob.
My small question is about the Writers Play Disco Elysium. So I'm not a game person, but have seen like playthrough videos where people are just really funny.
Yeah.
Like you showed me, is Dimension 20?
Yeah.
Showed me Dimension 20. I was like, this is very funny. Like this is hilarious. These are just like, they've got some showbiz stuff going on for them, but like they're still like just human beings playing.
Yes.
And so these playthrough videos are really intriguing to me, because I'm thinking like, I imagine, I haven't watched them, but I imagine like things got really funny.
Oh no, immediately. The reason we have 33, and if double check that like things are muted, Harrison, but yeah, the top one, professional writers bumble their way through Disco Elysium on Neophyte Studios. Like, I think I hit the bullseye on that one. And it's Pinckney, Dylan, and myself. Oh, I think me or Dylan was like controlling the gameplay, and we were letting Pinckney sort of motivate the decisions, right? And Pinckney is like a complete like obstinate monster whenever he plays games.
I will not play the game.
No, he tries to break things.
I always play my own game.
Yeah, and so like it's immediately interesting content, first of all. And that felt like in the MFA, my first moment where I could flex that kind of director-producer of like, I can recognize, and this is like MFA in writing, right? In a scene or in a conflict in a story, this is the interesting moment, right? This is like the dagger in the throat that you want to go for. And so we really were able to double down. So it's just us on Discord, us on OBS, which is the same thing we're doing now. Gameplay on one side, cameras on the other. I've been doing the same thing for 3 years. I've just been polishing it up, and now I have a studio. And so with the subtitles there, you can kind of see, you know, we're taking beat by beat, and we're talking about, how meaningful choices are, or the way the information is revealed, or how the gameplay, you know, moves through story. But then you get the choice, you get the moment of choice, and we talk about the significance of branching in these different directions, right? So it's like the whole complete work of the art object, but also the intrigue of us playing it in an interesting way, and us as these kind of bedraggled MFAs with our like lunatic hillbilly professor, like getting through this game to get
so like to think that the world would think of that as an insult.
Hey, yeah, we're proud.
Yeah, and so like on the let's play angle, on the academic angle, on just like the improv angle, right? It was just some really dynamite content. And Disco Elysium is one of those games that like kind of jumped into the era of legitimacy, but like it's still like one layer away from, you know, more people know about what Call of Duty is, right? But Call of Duty has less BAFTA awards than Disco Elysium, so it's kind of in this weird position. And Disco Elysium, in my time as an MFA, another reason it shot up is the need for this sort of scholarship from our point of view, instead of just people who talk about games on the internet, right? People in the academic system taking this piece of media seriously. Most of the comments, if you scroll down there, Harrison, are people being like, oh my God, thank you. Like, thank you for talking about this. I think if you keep going past the suggestions, you know, like this was so good, or quoting things Pinckney said, like that's so funny, or you guys need to talk about this game more, or like thank you for taking this seriously. And for 3 years, those comments have really bolstered me. Again, that we're engaging with the community in this way, and just random people. And I remember myself being a high schooler interested in like pulp cinema or video games, but also like an avid consumer of philosophy and like the prestigious authors, and seeing the value in like that high art, low art kind of like, you know, and blowing that conversation up as kind of like an edgy teenager, but like seeing me be able to do that for other people, right? And know that like the thing that they like is taken seriously by someone at the academy level. That just like felt good for 3 years. And anytime I questioned what I was doing, I could like peruse this comment section and be like, no, what I'm doing, like even if it's like 50 people who are able to leave comments, like what we're doing means something, and it's interesting. And what Pinckney always taught me, and then and Raph as well, right? If you can create media that people like, right? Higher, lower, like that whole bullshit. If people are talking about it and people want to read your work or participate or consume your work, then you're a good maker of work, right? Yes. Like that's the only metric. Everything else will fall into place. And so that's always been good for me, and I think we tapped into something right away, and it was my first, again, to go back, my first experience as like a director, producer, being like, that's our angle, you know, and really dig into it.
I see such potential for like taking like these kind of like YouTube forms, you know what I mean? Like the vlog, right? Mm-hmm. Like the playthrough. And putting this almost like literary spin on them, because the vlog is like creative nonfiction.
Yes.
You know, it is the personal essay. Yeah. And this playthrough is exactly that marriage, right, of like high art, low art, but like fuck those terms anyway. You know what I mean? But we get it, you know.
Yeah,
like, of course it makes sense.
Yeah.
And I see Neophyte Studios expanding and maybe taking on these more viral forms, you know what I mean? Because I feel like we could get a lot of followers for the university if you were like, hey, this class of undergrads, this nonfiction class, do vlogs and we'll stream them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or like,
absolutely,
do a tutorial, but make it into like a hermit crab essay where it's like, you know what I mean? Like.
Yeah. Well, and that's been my pitch, and Carla, like a lot of your students as well, you've had your sections of freshmen in their University 101 classes of like, this is how you do college, right? The lowest of the low, like thing you do first when you get into academics in college. And I've made the same pitch I always have, which is just like, come in and make things. And we've produced at this past year an undergraduate kind of like campus life podcast with these two like incredibly funny freshman girls who've had like the key, in metaphorically, right, to my office to come in and make work, right, in our audio booth, in our other office space every Friday. And I tell them, like, I don't schedule meetings. Noon to 1 every Friday is yours. And they come in diligently and they make a podcast, right? And they're going strong. And A, it lets them work out their beef with campus life, but B, they're incredibly funny, and they produce these sort of tight stories talking about things that are going on and deeper of what it means to be an 18, 19-year-old girl attending SIU in 2022, 2023. To me, I'm like, it's scholarship, Yeah. And they're incredibly funny, and they've refined their form, and they focus on a story now and where the intrigue in that story is. And other YouTubers that are SIUCs now, they've come in just to produce, better capture of gameplay videos. Or a student in actually Ismail's class came to me and said, I've got my YouTube channel. I want to take my academic English 101 essay and turn it into a YouTube video essay. And I'm like, there we go. And talk about, like, you're a domain expert of the form of media that you consume, whether it is, video essays from people with like philosophy or history degrees, or just kind of like your average like schmo who like plays games and turn themselves into something. Like, if you're watching them 10 hours a week, just like if you're watching Netflix or film or any other form of TV or playing video games, like, what makes that good. And you should be the best, creator of that media. And so I just, in my lab, want to give you the keys and the tools to make that content and say, like, no, you can do it. And, like, you can be a neophyte. Like, you can just bang away and put something out there, but, like, finish your work, deliver it, right? And put it out there, and then get on to your next one and just keep going. And that's been really nice. And from undergraduates to professors publishing their work on this platform, it's been really a thrill, and I would like to continue to do that. And I see no reason why it shouldn't be the new model for universities themselves.
Well, that's the thing, right? I mean, this is publication.
Right.
And it's, right now there's no way to get credit for it
Right.
at the university, but that's,
at the university is key, right?
I mean, they'd probably burn me at the stake for
Yeah.
saying this, but like,
Oh,
peer
by all
review.
means.
All right, let's go. But like,
it's just us.
peer review,
Yeah.
as it's understood in like an academic environment, it's like that's what you're getting. Those comments in the YouTube video are that. You know what I mean?
Precisely.
That's the feedback. That's the peer
Exactly.
review.
And
you use them-
33,000 views, right?
And
Like-
that's the prestige of the publication. That
Yep.
rates it number one, right? You know what I mean? And it's silly, but it's not. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, but you're poking at those same conventions and those same historic, I don't know, but just it's, academia is what it is. We follow those rules because that's
I know.
what we must do, because that's the game. That's
Yeah.
the gameplay.
Yeah.
The rules of the game are you do this, you do this. There are rules about who can review, and partly what I've been thinking as you're as we're talking about the lab. First of all, I also have been thinking a lot. I just love lab. So again, we are researchers. This is scholarship. This is knowledge. This is experimentation.
Yep.
And so it is publication. It is democratic. As someone in the media arts, we were all so thrilled first with cable access. It's like, oh my gosh, public access. Now everybody's going to be able to, express themselves. And then with the internet, and now with this and with this. And so I think, we have the luxury of, I guess I should say, it's like I especially lately have been feeling just the luxury that I have being an older person, having lived through 40 years of higher ed. It's like I got nothing else to prove.
Yeah.
I can do, so now is the challenge for us, I think, to allow this kind of play, to allow this kind of experimentation. I think it is also incumbent on us to keep poking at whoever it might be here or in academia, just to say, okay, this is scholarship.
Yeah.
This is scholarship. What you are doing, what you have been doing for 3 years, is scholarship, is experimentation, running experiments, trying this, trying that, similar to the grad students I've worked with in computer engineering and computer science, again, running experience, gaining knowledge and sharing that knowledge, and that it has been collaborative, and that you have, the lab is a place now where you will exit. You will exit and you will take this with you. And now it's incumbent on, the faculty and the next wave, the next gen. Okay, now what will we do with this? What will be, sustained here? And I think as we can keep challenging, we want this to happen, because what you're describing is not unlike, it's like, oh, well, that's not the way a script should be written, or that's not this, or that's not that. And yet it all comes down to, whether it's down to pixels, whether it's down to dots and dashes or ones and zeros or whatever it might be, it's still story. It's still story, and story in many different expressions. It's still learning, and okay, this is totally, I just have to, so the morning after my husband had been in surgery all night long from a massive heart attack, the doctor came to me, and one of the first things he said was, your husband was pre-dead. And so of course he's
great.
And my first thought was, it's I'm really like tired and disassociated right now, and it's like, and I can't understand him, and I don't know what he's talking about. And of course, when I told my friend, the first thing he said to me was, "Well, aren't we all pre-dead?"
Yeah.
But I think that's where these kinds of collaborations with other disciplines. Because what you're talking about, it's like producer director. It's like, yeah, Matt, like that's what we do. Like, it's like producer director, like writing, producing, directing, collaboration. That's what we always do. And finding ways to bring all of these things together and now send you off to continue in your way, and then what continues to happen here.
And if I may, just to follow up on that, part of what you were saying earlier, Carla, about like this is how it's done in academia and stuff, right? I question the cultural relevancy of anything that's done in academia, in a big way, because this is a thesis. I'm actually going to go and fucking get this thesis out of the fucking library. Right. Unlike so many like shelved tiny, right? Yeah. And like that, to me, like what we were talking about earlier about this is what peer review is. This is what the prestige of the publication is, right? Those criteria actually make more sense to me as a digital native, as a millennial, than anyone passing around an essay among tenured professors at Ivy League universities.
Yeah, PDF, lands
exactly.
in your inbox with a thud.
But quite frankly, I never should have let you do any of this through an English department.
Yeah. Well, you know, and I will exempt everybody else in the room from this opinion, but I mean, one of the worst things that ever happened to fiction and writing in general was that creative writing programs sprang up in English departments, because we frankly, I know you belong in an English department and should be tenured. You're dead and buried like the rest of us. No, I'm just saying, anybody who's watching this, Raph is cool and needs to get tenure. Raph loves the English department. Okay, but no. It was a mistake, right? It was a historical mistake, and I will say again, and God bless them all, but many of my predecessors here wanted to be and envied English professors, people with doctorates, right? And we just have this little master's degree and our little novels, you know what I mean? And like, I'm not like that. And so it has freaked everybody out, you know, like, because I'm just like, I wouldn't be a PhD in an English department if you put a gun to my head, you know what I mean? And so there's a real reversal there. And of course, there's also the reversal. There's the problem that what you do, right, and what you all do is popular.
Yeah.
Yes. And there's this sort of, you know, inverse pride or whatever you want to call it in conventional departments, that the lesser known you are and the more disdained you are by normal people, clearly the better you are.
The isolato in the garret. There it is again.
Right. No.
There's the archetype.
Exactly.
That's what we are combating.
Yes.
That's what you're combating so eloquently.
And so that democratizing is like, that's everything. I mean, you know, you have implemented that. You know, with me it was a theoretical really until you arrived. But that's the way this is all going. Like the way AIs are going. And again, like, I'm weirded out, so I don't know what, you know, like regular non-obsessed people must feel like.
Oh, non-obsessed people are freaking
Yeah,
out.
well, they should be. Like, I don't, you know, like, I know about this stuff and I'm like, oh my God. Anyway, but it is, like, talk about democratization, because the interface of everything is going to become verbal. Right. The interface of every piece of software you have ever used is soon going to be a chat box. And you will write into that chat box, please do the following things.
Which, if I can jump ahead,
I should not speechify.
I'm like, I've got examples of the exact things like you're all talking about that I'm chomping at the bit to like throw out. This video is about to go up on Neophyte's YouTube for anyone, and I'm actually looking to get the name right. But Kejiro's AI command Chat GPT integration with the Unity editor. This made its rounds on social media like 2 weeks ago. Especially on,
and it's
like,
already
TikTok.
old news.
It's already old news. And so this Unity engineer from Japan made this kind of like plugin tool that opens up a little chat box in Unity. And I don't think I have an example of this in my portfolio because the video was actually cut by Dejeuner. So like, thank you again. Talking about the collaborative nature, like, I see an answer, I produce it, I get people in, I kick it to one of my employees to cut the video, I upload, I get it done. And it's this whole collaborative thing as we discuss kind of the virtues of, like you said, being able to use natural language into a game editor and say, make, 10 cubes, now change the lights to do this and do that, and finding where the limitations are. And actually in the video, if anyone wants to watch it when it gets uploaded, we crack like live how this thing works, right? We pull like the curtain back and we realize, oh, it's just doing this, this, and this, which is way less interesting than we thought. It was like magic. And then we start playing with it. And it's amazing. And we realize, okay, here's the limitations. And we realize if that's a limitation, it means this. And if therefore, as we're working through the process, and then we talk about, okay, so what does that mean for us? And where does this tool have to go? And it's not meant to be like consumer ready, it barely functions, but we were able to replicate some things and getting it work.
It's a lab product.
It's a lab product, and the experimentation and the lab and Neophyte Studios and even like reclaiming the word workshop, right, from Iowa State and the model that it means, and really making it like a woodworking workshop for language and storytelling. That's been fun. And to talk about the democratization angle, Pinckney's actually the one that hooked me up with that mentality, because the first thing I did of any meaning when I got here was come into your office on your behest when you had a VR rig and an Oculus Rift set up in your office, and he just said, students, undergraduate at the time, come and play. Like, I know you guys are undergraduate students, you don't have $3,000 to like buy a computer and a headset. Come to my office, play this cutting edge piece of technology in like 2017, 2018. And I did, and from my predecessor, it was actually a conversation with Sarah Gillick, who said you should just do an independent study with Pinckney. And I did as an undergrad, and it was like this moment, this hands-off moment where I got to research and experiment, and the democratization of being handed the tools as somebody that otherwise couldn't be able to, interface with them. And I created and presented a VR narrative experience. At the
Lunetic Arboretum.
Lunetic Arboretum.
I'll never forget Lunetic.
Yeah, and it was for a tool set.
I re-experience it in VR every now and again.
No, it's wonderful, and symmetry is what I built it in, so I had to figure out, as somebody that's never made a game before, what are the tools, what are the tutorials, how do I make this, how do I render narrative and like the moment of character action change into kind of this surreal experience, and I presented at SIU's research, and I know this is undergraduate work, but I'm talking about, but that has echoed up until this moment, where I've been thrilled with the sort of people that this program has been admitting, and that I get to give this like polyphony of voices, the democratization of tools, whether it's AI, game design experience, being able to platform them or otherwise. That's been the thing that keeps me happy. Day in, day out, is being able to work on projects from this really diverse creator base, not only like ethnically in background and across like gender spectrums, but also like the technical experience, right? That's been rad as hell. I don't know, it's weird that you're raising your hand at me.
I'm the one
it's just
tables have turned.
It's just been, like, it's been so much fun to give that like incredibly diverse and like every intersectional aspect you could possibly conceive of, and say, all right, what you gonna make? That's interesting. Keep going.
And that's kind of my question for you. I have an open-ended question here, and then I have to go. I have an interview, but the intersectional aspect of what you're doing, right? Like how you're weaving, like diverse voices together, or like empowering people, marginalized folks, to like tell their stories. I love that that's happening. And I love that like you have an understanding of your own positionality that like allows you to leverage the privilege that you do have to like really uplift people.
That's my whole game.
It's been gorgeous to watch.
Thank you.
But I'm actually just curious, like in terms of accessibility. In terms of like what Lindsay and Dejanae were talking about in terms of race and gender, sexual orientation. How are you making these technologies accessible to marginalized folks, and how are you maybe talk more about how you have used your positionality?
I'll say one of the other ones, the intersectional like angles that I want to bring up here before I continue is age. Also, in the MFA, we get a variety of ages, and so ageism and the technology barrier in ageism is so it seems often an impossible divide, and one that a lot of technologists just ignore. Because there's new fodder being born every day that are going to be integrated into their resources, so they can just keep focusing on the future. But one of the ways is in tandem with the classes and the model that Raf and Pinckney have built. When there is a question, I've been on hand as a research assistant or my lab of saying, like, come on down. We'll sit down, we'll talk, we'll work through it, right? We'll figure it out, or we'll make this technology work for you. And if the way that you guys are describing it isn't working, right, there's a million other ways to produce a video or create digital art or do this or do that. And a lot of people over the past 3 years have come to me stressed because you guys gave them very open-ended prompts, and it became like, it was scary at first. And there was a lot of fear, and I was like, cool, no, it's open-ended. Like, this is your moment, right? What does this mean to you when you need to just create a digital work every week without restraint? And it has to be interesting and it has to be narrative. What are you interested in? What do you want to consume? And here's the entire buffet, right? Taste and sample and engage and make, and start like engaging with what, and there's no model to it. You've just got to start playing, experimenting, researching, right? And finding the thing that works for you. And I've seen resistance to that in my position, and I've seen people, you know, delighted and elated by it. And I think also another, you know, kind of diverse angle that model resonates with is kind of like the neurodivergent to whatever spectrum of conditions or your cocktail is of neurodivergent tendencies. Seeing people be able to make what they want in the way that works for them, right, without any like control or fitting it into a form, has been thrilling. And I think people have been able to embrace like the joy of creativity inside themselves without any questioning. And for me, a model for that has been David Lynch started up his YouTube channel back in 2020. Where just the wildest shit on there, the weather, or just seeing what projects, and the dude's like just doing woodworking and making a project so they can pull out a number and have his random number of the day. It just like the engagement of seeing this person like unabashedly make things. And other, you know, documentaries from games that have been released. There was a documentary from Supergiant Studios who made Hades and other games. That was really exciting to see them work through COVID, and people that like are making games with a narrative that I care about talk about what it's like and to pursue their dream and just work and make and try other things, and throwing that philosophy at people, right, and letting them be stressed out, but give them the tools. And if they want to pick up the tools and they're hammering away, I'm like, oh, well, kind of get at it from this angle. Or this person can teach you this, or follow this resource, and engaging their sort of independent learning with the lab, and meeting people where they are has been exciting. And just like saying like, no, I know this is hard for you, but like the only way this conversation is going to be accessible to someone like you, your unique cocktail of intersectional identity, is if you create media and you participate in the conversation. Otherwise, people like you are going to be left out of this moment. And like, you know, that's from the production side, but another big moment is we used to do a lot of kind of like VR arcade events. And one of the first things that I like was a really wake-up call to me, again, I'm coming from a sociology background, but this was a hands-on moment of like, oh shit, there's people being left out, is black hair not working with VR headsets. Right, like at all, and people would come in for their demos and to play games at SIUC or other events, and it's just like this literally can't accommodate, because like my head shape and I've got like hair like wrapped up, and I'm just like, I'm sorry, like I don't have an answer. Like it's just a bad situation, and then I got to conversations of like, well, come down by the lab, engage in this media, right? Participate in this, because you're being left out of this really dramatic moment, and like that's like horrifically fucked up, right? That like tech bros and the designers of this technology, like these people are clearly not in the room, or else this would be addressed.
Well, yeah, I mean, who's VR made for?
Right.
No, I'm literally like, I have to, you know, I own that. Like,
you have no hair.
Right, exactly. Like, it's perfect for me, you know. So I'm just like, VR's awesome.
And there's not even a market that I've seen of a company making VR solutions for like black hair texture. Like that doesn't even exist as a company, which is like belligerently insane. So
it's insane how whitewashed tech is. It's like,
that's to suffice, right?
Exactly.
Well, and just never. I mean, I feel that so many times every day as I'm trying to use some platform, some app, some tech. It's like, did nobody test this? Did nobody ever try to use this? Like, did you just bang out some code, or you know, because that, and so that user experience, and I think again, kind of coming back from, you know, like the last kind of, you know, the last 10 years in my life of thinking about the learner experience, but the learner experience now in med schools. And in some ways, this new experience will make that learning more accessible for some med students, perhaps. So I think, again, it's like, you know, I keep coming back in every conversation, like, okay, what we do is really, really hard.
Yeah.
And whether we're artists or teachers or whatever, and everything we're doing is built on all these assumptions and expectations and rules and policies of everybody trying to keep everybody else out.
Yeah.
And that we just keep plugging away. And so I think, again, you know, there's story at the heart of all of this, and there's democracy at the heart of all of this, and there's technology, media, you know, whatever that medium of choice might be. Period.
Well, I will interrupt. Oh, I'm sorry. Please go
I have
ahead.
to run 'cause
I was going to say. So yeah, I know you need to go.
Do you need to deliberate without me in the room? Can I?
What I was going to suggest is, can we deliberate online? I will drop you all a line,
That's fine.
and we can figure out if we're going to sign this stuff. I would give you a cautiously optimistic view, given the conversation that is going on. If I were you, I would go ahead and celebrate.
Well, as far as I'm
but we will
considering
do because Raph needs to go. I've actually got a 3:00. Carla has volunteered a lot of time and energy to this, and thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, it's been
and this has been like this is really different from, you know, how thesis defenses have been, capstone experiences have been in the past. But I love this. Like you know, I've learned from this. Like I really feel enlightened about hair. I'm like, I feel so bad for you people with hair.
Yeah.
Like, but no. It's you know, this was good. This was very, very good in my opinion.
Thank you.
Good content, but also good, you know.
Thanks for letting me, you know, like, talk about me at your defense. But I will say, you know, as another long time, you know, I mean, I'm very fortunate to have a world in higher ed, and I love, like, this is why I want to be here, for these conversations. And I've learned as much through working with you and keeping those conversations, and that it's like, it's our challenge to keep this going, to keep the conversations going.
Right.
You know, this is aside from this. It's like, I don't know, I think the Twitch stopped or something. You know, it's like, this isn't part of your. I was at the FSI last night at the Fermentation Science Institute, and you know, it's like there was a beer tasting, and there were 100 people there, and it was a lot of the people, some deans, some faculty, some alums, and just random people from town who came to taste beer. And I was chatting with someone at the end. It's like, you know, we used to have places where we could go for something like this. That, you know, it was really fun to meet people, to talk with people, and that world of the university, that you know, just like in the world of the mind, and having these conversations. It's like, oh yeah, I read something about Raf's book, like that's really cool, and you know, like, but it's like, but I didn't. It's like, oh yeah, well, I'd love to learn more about that, but I'm tired. I'm going to go home, and so I just want to challenge us all to keep the conversations going.
Yeah.
Well, you're one of the folks who's done that. I mean, you know, all credit to you.
Well, that's because I'm the Budinsky. It's like, oh, I have to be in on this. I have to be in on this.
Yeah, but I mean, XR Collective would have never happened without you. I mean, you know, all of that stuff is really down to you. And you know, when you say we, I mean, you know, like, it really is kind of the people at this table and the people who are observing. You know what I mean? Like, it's you know, I mean, we really is like the people who are in this room plus a few others, right?
Well, and I know I certainly have learned. We have stopped recording, right? Or streaming.
We're not streaming anymore.
We are still streaming.
Oh, okay.
still
I
streaming.
won't say what I was going to say.
Maybe we should.
Thank you, Harrison.
Yeah, we can. Goodbye.
Cut it. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I might do another video.
Y'all come back real soon now.
I might do another video of just like parsing through
No,
my
that's
portfolio of
why
material.
don't we do that?
Yeah.
And have that up on the channel,
Cool.
just so people could follow this
companion
conversation with
Yeah.
the literal work that
Cool.
you have done.
Yeah.
So look out
Yeah.
for that other video
Yeah.
sometime
Yeah, great.
this month.
Great.
But I have
good.
to say, I met a
Are we all clear?
We're clear.
We good?